I suggested we watch this shortly after I saw the documentary, the very recently released documentary on this. And I was really excited because watching the documentary, and I'll reveal it in a minute, watching the documentary made me realize again how much there is to discuss about Paul Verhoeven's Showgirls. And I want to take the rest of the show now to kind of talk about this because this was my fourth time watching it. I watched it last night. This was my fourth time watching this movie. You two have never seen Showgirls. And it's noteworthy in my opinion because it's a movie I always find myself like talking about with friends or like just with other people that I talk to on the internet and stuff. I love picking people's brains about it. I love reading about this movie. There's so much to talk about. With a little background, and then I'm throwing it over to you guys because I want you guys to almost not dominate, but be more predominant with the discourse too, because I've clouded the internet with my words on this movie to begin with. My opinion's really out there. Not a whole ton has changed, but Showgirls is often regarded as one of the worst films ever made. Look it up. It was a failure when it came out in theaters. It is the highest grossing NC-17 rated movie, meaning that if you were under 17, you couldn't come and see the movie even with parent or guardian supervision. It was only adults. They had bodyguards outside of theaters to make sure that it was only adults. The advertising was a little more restricted on it too with its rating. It didn't make a lot of money, but like I said, it's still the highest grossing NC-17 movie ever made, which I find hilarious in some respects. It didn't, like I said, didn't do well in theaters. Kind of got a new life on home video. Coupled with sort of extensive critical reevaluation, it's gained some status as a satire. And also, the film's home video success kind of rendered it a cult movie in some respects. There is a ton to chew on with this movie. I think the best place to start is just general impressions. So, Dominic, what'd you think of your Showgirls first time around?
So after watching the film, I did read some general things. I didn't want to cloud my judgment too much with reactions from the internet, but I was shocked actually to see that this is considered one of the worst films ever made, and I just have to wholly disagree with that. Wholly disagree. I have seen mediocre movies that are way worse than this. This movie had the balls to really do something with its premise, and I got to give it props for that.
It had the breasts too.
Yeah, on top of that, it's flashy. It has meaning in its sex scenes, which I did not put a lot of stock in because obviously I knew NC-17. There's going to be a lot of sex in here. It's literally called Showgirls and whatnot. I kind of knew what I was in for. Didn't watch any trailers or anything, but I could get the vibe. But you know what? Yeah, the sex was actually had some meaning behind it, right? There is actual art in it, believe it or not, right? And it's like whatever, like the ads on Pornhub are way more explicit than this whole movie combined. So that's whatever, but I was just first and foremost shocked by that. Maybe not a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is what it is. I would say maybe like 35 or maybe even go bold as to say 40. But having said all that. I think there are some major, not responsible things it does with its plot, and just weird tangents, lots of dead weight with this. And granted, it is 1995 when this movie was made, and it is Paul Verhoeven who has a very specific style, but still at the same time. Critical evaluation, even by those standards, and especially by today's standards, I do understand why it may not have done well, but I do not think it's one of the worst films ever made, and there is merit to this, and it's definitely worth a watch. I'll say that.
Joe, your thoughts?
I'm glad I popped my Showgirls cherry, dude. I'm glad.
Yeah,
in
dude.
all seriousness, because I actually watched the trailer for You Don't Know Me today after I watched it on Monday.
That's the documentary that just came out.
And I actually do want to watch the documentary too after seeing this. I don't think this is one of the worst movies ever made. I wouldn't even put it close to that because the entire time I was watching this, I was never actually really bored. That to me is when a movie is one of the worst things ever. Is when you're bored watching it. Now you could say I wasn't bored because I'm a heterosexual man, so there was plenty to look at all the time. Sure, you could say that, but I wasn't bored. And like at the end of the day, I was awake. For a movie that's also 2 hours and 8 minutes, I don't know if it's because it's just constant sex scenes and dancing, but it felt like it flew by too. So I never felt like it drags. No, I mean that's because like there's like 20 billion side plots going on at once, but. Yeah. It does fly by. I will say this. Even though I don't think it's one of the worst movies ever made, I'm sorry to break your heart, Steve. I don't think it's a good movie. I think it's just
cult status makes sense.
Yeah,
its cult status makes perfect sense.
The entire time I was watching this, like, I'm like, I totally see why this is a cult movie. I get it. Like, and the entire time I was watching it too, I'm like, but I don't see why people consider it one of the worst movies ever made. So far, it's just been okay at best. Like, some of the acting, yeah, it's not that good. And Elizabeth Berkley, like, I remember watching her on Saved by the Bell, and like, you know, she wasn't that good in that. and even here, she's not the best, but like, it's not terrible. Like, it's odd that like it really is considered one of the worst things ever made. Because the entire time I'm watching this, I'm like, damn. I mean, last year I've seen some really bad movies that like have way higher budgets, stuff like that, and I think it's just trash. Like, you know, I'm like the new Men in Black to me, I hated it. I think it's one of the worst things I've seen. Honestly, I really do. This, to me, at least, I was entertained. And there were at least a few jokes here and there that I laughed at. Like the Versace joke, when it was really Versace. I did actually get a chuckle out of that. Other than that, though, I'm just surprised. I'm surprised that also the rest of this cast, too, like, actually went on to have careers, but not Elizabeth Berkley. Like Kyle I can't pronounce his last name. McLachlan?
McLachlan.
Never mind. I messed it up again. But, like, I'm glad, like, you know, it's really interesting seeing, like, some of these other people. Even Gina Gershon, who plays Crystal Connors. A lot of these people actually went on to, like, have careers, but not Elizabeth Berkley. I know this, like, really tanked her career, apparently, and it killed it for her. Which really sucks because I don't think it's really that bad of a movie. Even Paul,
she took the heat. She took the heat on because she was literally the face of the movie. She was, in every respect of the word.
She's the one who got blackballed, and this was supposed to be her breakout after Saved by the Bell ended. And that sucks. The human element sucks.
I'll say this too, like the dancing. Yeah, while it's topless all the time, it's actually pretty good in this movie. The dance scenes are actually really good, and the entire time I was watching this film, and as Dom was saying with the sex scenes, the entire time I was just like, damn, 50 Shades of Grey, eat your heart out, man. Your sex scenes suck compared to this movie, man. They are so tame. They are so tame compared to the Showgirls.
The pool scene and the sex scene that happens there,
yeah.
I was like, damn, dude, like that's awesome. You're doing something here with it. It's not just like bed, close up on the woman, and then just two bodies.
Boobs.
No, it's so hedonistic. It's over the top, and it perfectly displays, you know, what those characters are at that moment in time.
Yeah, I think I even mentioned it during one of our. I think when we talked briefly. I think we talked 50 Shades Freed on the original show. I mentioned. Yeah. I said they should have at least for originality, or at least for some semblance of erotica. Even though I really don't think that this Showgirls is particularly erotic. We'll get into that if we have time. But I said they should have taken a page out of this. I said they really should have. Like, this is how you go all the way, you know, with nudity and with sex. You know what I mean? But they copped out. I don't want to go too much down there, but it's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There was only one scene that really turned me off, and even the writer and director, I think, have come out and said, like, yeah, this over time this was a mistake. It is the rape scene. Like, I think it's just, I think it's really bad. It's over the top and everything. And I'm not saying, like, you know, rape should not be a subject matter film should never touch and everything. No, that is something films can talk about and, like, you know, express. But, like, the way it's done in this movie is very grotesque. And like, even, like, kind of childish, and just, like, how the rest of the movie goes and the way it's actually cut. It goes from that scene to, like, a very, like, happy scene and back to that. It's just, like...
We didn't need to cut back. We didn't need to cut back. No. I was hoping to touch on that later, but
if we're gonna get into it now, it's just the way. Again, I think movies should be able to talk about anything. So that it's not the fact that the movie did have a rape scene. One of my favorite movies of all time is Saturday Night Fever, and unironically, I genuinely love that movie, and it has I think at least 2 rape scenes in it, or at least one of them is, like kind of on that line. But regardless, just the way that it's responsibly within the context of its plot uses it is, I think, very powerful. Now, where Showgirls uses it, I think is grossly like irresponsible and just like what is this? I understand everything about this movie is over the top, is pushed to the max and extreme, but when you handle a topic like rape, which is the worst of the worst, which is the most extreme, one of the most extreme things you can talk about, it's you have to handle that with a heightened level of caution, and this movie absolutely did not do it. And the way that it resolved that plot line was, we can go into spoilers here, right? This is however many years. But the way it handles it, it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna have Elizabeth Berkley, we're gonna have Nomi just kick the shit out of the rapist. I'm like, okay, yeah, but her friend is still in the hospital, extremely traumatic. We don't even like get her reaction. We don't even spend time with her. We don't spend time with her enough as a character to justify that, where she's literally just an item to just kind of really just serve Nomi. So you even have that aspect of the black best friend, which is a problematic trope in and of itself. But then you have that happen to her, and she's really just serving. Zooming out and looking at the plot here, like she's really just serving Nomi in this way that is just really like disappointing and sad, and like this is that left a really bad taste in my mouth for that reason specifically, because I guess I'll transition out of that, because I don't know how you transition out of talking about rape, but transitioning out of that, what Showgirls really struck me right off the bat was how absolutely unlikable Nomi was as a character for me. I did not like her one bit at all. And to have a rags to riches, or I guess rags to fame in this sense, story, a template for a story like that, you kind of have to have some likability to it, I guess. Well, okay, I guess Wolf of Wall Street proved that you didn't, but at least Wolf of Wall Street responsibly handled it in such a way where it's like, yeah,
what he's doing,
you don't like him. Yeah, you don't like him, but like the whole movie is built around that, and that is the message. You're supposed to be freaking pissed at Jordan Belfort about this.
It contextualized the world.
Yeah.
It contextualized the world too. I'll jump in here. I'll jump in and say, as far as Nomi goes as a character, I think you really stated. I'm not even going to continue with the rape scene controversy on that, because I think you stated my opinion on it pretty well too. That's been I've seen this movie 4 times. It does not get any easier to watch. I dread when it comes to just the way. I don't think anybody enjoys watching a rape scene play out in a movie, but this movie is especially cruel. Especially cruel, the way that it does it, and it does a disservice to Molly as well, the character, and that plot line. But going forward, though, there's always this one saying I've read about people talking about Showgirls, is that you can summarize Nomi best in the first 15 minutes of the movie, up until the point when Molly is so gracious and buys her a meal, and she throws the fries around and squirts the ketchup. It just says different places.
Jesus.
Like, dude, you know from the beginning, like, she is a hurricane of a human being.
Yeah, that I will say that she does come across off as that. It's like the minute you set eyes on her, and like you see that opening scene when she gets to Vegas and everything, even when she gets in the hitchhiker's car. I mean, when she hitchhikes into that guy's car, the way she just comes across, like, okay, yeah, this girl's got some problems with her, and she just doesn't care who you are.
Yeah, this is terrible, but as a man too, it's like I take a look at her, I'm like, good Lord, you will break my heart and ruin my credit score.
It's true.
I mean, might rock my world, but at what a price. But yeah, she's a fascinating character though, and like Joe, you're more familiar with Saved by the Bell than I am. The great part about You Don't Know Me, the documentary, is they tie back Berkeley's career with Saved by the Bell, because she played Jessie Sparrow, I think, on that show. Everybody, they tied back one point, and people compare Showgirls to the episode of Saved by the Bell when she gets hooked on those caffeine pills.
Yeah.
when she gets hooked on those caffeine pills and she has that.
yeah,
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I've seen that episode. I have. And if you've seen that episode, you kind of see where like we're almost like her overacting is because I'm not gonna stand on a table and say Elizabeth Berkley's great here. I think she fits Nomi. I think she fits that sort of destructive, toxic person. But there's moments here that are very broad and very over the top with her acting. Like you could see why, as bad as it is to say, you could see why Elizabeth Berkley didn't become an A-lister like Sharon Stone after Basic Instinct.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is this movie in Paul Verhoeven's career, it's sandwiched between two of his best works, which is Basic Instinct before, and then after Starship Troopers, which is my favorite which is an amazing cult classic. I think that's my favorite out of all, even more than RoboCop. And it's just crazy that this movie is smack dab in the middle of those two. But actually, it totally makes sense when you put Showgirls and Starship Troopers back to back. It's like, oh yeah, no, this is absolutely the same director. This is Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah, you see the similarities there too, and you see some of the commonalities as well. The thing that struck me about Showgirls, I remember the first time I watched it, and almost every time after, is and this is why I almost think it's a critical injustice to consider this one of the worst films ever made, because I honestly don't think the acting is uniformly bad. I don't. I think Gina Gershon's very good. I think the sexual tension between her and Nomi you can cut like a knife. And it only grows readily more and more apparent. Like more and more apparent. It took me a few rewatches to really notice between Crystal and Nomi, but I'm like, there is tension there like a son of a bitch. There is an alternate script where they just like have a whole love scene. Like in certain moments. But I think Kyle MacLachlan's great. I really do. I think his character is Zach, as kind of Crystal's part-time boyfriend and the entertainment director of the Stardust. I think he's good. I also, you know who I love in this movie, and I love her every time I watch it, is Lynn Tucci, who plays Henrietta.
Yeah.
Mama.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite.
She is hilarious. I guess she went on to be in Orange is the New Black, which I didn't know. But she is so damn good in this. She is like the life and the spirit too of the movie. I think the acting is uniformly solid personally, and I also think the production is fantastic in a lot of moments. The theatricality of some of these dance scenes and the choreography, not to mention like the goddess show itself, is a beautiful production. I don't think you could hate everything you want. I don't think you could call this an awful movie on the basis of its aesthetics alone. Yeah.
It's the dance scenes are actually pretty impressive. They're not the greatest dance scenes in the world in the history of cinema, but yeah, they definitely hold your attention. And obviously boobs flying around too. Yeah. But actually, just like for what it's worth, how it is shot and how the raw dancing is, and how they play into the characters of Crystal and Nomi, for how Nomi is first very nervous. There's the tension of she's literally slipping on monkey shit. And like, you feel for her in that sense. You don't want her to mess up, even though she's unlikable, but you don't want her to mess up just because you don't want to see the consequences of that and how everyone else is kind of putting effort into her, but still. And then how each dance is a different stage in her Las Vegas career where, okay, now she's like trying to fight for the top, and there's that tension with Crystal Connors on stage. The dancing, surprisingly, the two things I was worried about with this movie, which was the dancing and the sex, actually wound up being like pretty damn good in terms of like artistic merit and being entertaining and not being the campiest things in the world. I actually genuinely enjoyed that. The problem is just this kind of aimless script, and it's trying to be something. It really it wants to hold the title of being Rags to Riches or like Drunk with Power, or maybe this is what it's like to be in entertainment in America, all those kind of grand themes in all these other great works, but it just can't figure it out how to get there. I think it's like bloated with just one or two or three too many characters. Like the character of he is the bouncer who gets fired.
James.
James, who kind of stalks her. Yeah, Joe, take it.
But yeah, not only is he stalker, but like I literally thought about this earlier today. You can literally take him out of the movie, and the course of events do not change whatsoever. Because
Yeah.
you think this whole like dance number that he's coming up with, like that's gonna come into play later. It doesn't. It actually turns out it sucks, and like if Naomi was ever part of it, her career would have been ruined. You think that they're gonna become like a love interest type of thing? They don't. He finds another girl. It's just like,
No,
damn, like this dude did not have to be in this movie.
you wouldn't get though one of my favorite lines in the movie. I totally agree. James is a pretty useless character, but you also wouldn't get one of my favorite lines in the movie when he says, "Oh, we get a discount on baby food."
That is a good line.
But it's this is the thing. He just I'll start by saying that the scene where Nomi and James are dancing together, that was good. That had electricity, that had tension, that had like the possibilities of a kernel of a story of something there, of something exciting. Even fighting against the grain of the big, establishment, or not Hollywood, Las Vegas cabaret shows and whatever. I thought that would be a really exciting lane to go down, but no, it doesn't. They have that one moment of tension, and then she just fucks out of there, and then like he just becomes pathetic. He just simps over Naomi, over Nomi over the course of like another 2 hours, and then like just where he winds up is really pathetic and sad, and like I wish you weren't in this movie. Like this, your whole character and plotline was not here. Like this is sad. This is distraction.
I mean, the one defense I'll say though, and I've come back to this on subsequent rewatches, is that because I mean, by definition, Nomi makes it in Vegas. I mean, by definition, it's not the prettiest come up, and I think one of the big larger pictures of the movie is a woman's plight coming up in a world filled with abusers, misogynists, and assholes. I think that's a huge part of this, the overarching big picture of this. I do think, though, that the only thing I'll push back on is I'll say I think James serves some purpose of utterly failing, of a complete juxtaposition of where Nomi ends up. I mean, Nomi had to sacrifice a lot. She did a lot of bad shit to get there. We can't deny that. But at the same time, James, on the other hand, like there's a piece of him that is creative and wanting to fight, wanting to get out, and he's got a decent idea and a conceit. But he latches on to Nomi, and then Nomi goes her other way. Then he latches on to Penny. And then what happens is then his whole routine crumbles, and then he's going to wind up working a Joe job at the end of the day, which is probably what happens with a lot of people who move out to the West Coast, who move out to Vegas or move out to LA. You'll lose your ass. That's a gamble. That's where people who want to change and reinvent themselves go, is to the West Coast. So that's the only part I will push back on. I do think there's an interesting dichotomy there. But at the same time, for plot's sake and brevity's sake, I do think you could probably take him out and not lose a significant bunch of the movie.
Steve, that's a great angle that you just explained. If only that's how it felt to me. Like if anything, and now we're getting into like rewriting the movie because we know better as non-script writers. But anyway,
let's reboot.
Yeah. There we go. Let's all male cast of Showgirls. That'll be the progressive thing. Exactly. But no, but like maybe you could have brought that plot line or that feeling of a character to like one of the strippers that she works with at the Cheetah, or something else. That maybe with even just Penny, composite it into Penny, and that'll be a more a leaner thing there. But it's like just the way he. I think the biggest problem I have with James as a character is just the way he just fawns over Nomi so much, and it's just too sad to like have any respect for him, which maybe that's the point. Maybe he's supposed to be a victim of Nomi's tornado-like presence in Las Vegas. But it just rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it's supposed to. I don't know.
Indeed. No, I totally get your point. I understand that. But that's the only thing I would push back on, though, is I think there's an inherent juxtaposition there as well. But the one thing that I think is interesting too, I don't want to touch on the recurring motifs. If you're going to watch that documentary, Joe, I highly recommend You Don't Know Me. They do bring up sort of the recurring motifs of like the nails, like their nails, and like how Nomi's always eating chips, that I find fascinating. But I mean, I realize that during this discourse, we're kind of talking almost on a couple different levels here. Like I've seen and read enough about this movie over the years that like, I'm really interested in your guys's initial impressions of this, and I love that you're giving it. The one thing too that I think is worth noting as well is this movie's enjoyed a lot of popularity with the LGBT community.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see. And You Don't Know Me does a good job in this, and I've read a couple pieces on this, longer pieces that really dive solely into this matter. But kind of the consensus of it is that Know Me does something that, like, I think a lot of homosexual or queer people do too. They leave behind a regressive small town, a complicated past, or a troubling past in some instances, and they go in search of greener pastures. They make the family based upon who they surround themselves with, kind of like Nomi does with Henrietta, with Crystal early on, and with Molly. You kind of make up your family as you go, your own adopted family, and then you try and succeed by any means is necessary. And I think that resonates. I can't obviously speak for the community, but I think that resonates a lot. And I also think that there's something to be said to the flamboyant costumes and the decor and stuff. I think it speaks to, even in some ways, like drag shows, if you've seen those. Like a lot of the costumes.
I know, like, this does, like, the same thing like Rocky Horror Picture does, where it's like while the movie's playing, some stuff is reenacted on stage, and like a lot of drag shows usually have this as like some big event night that they do. Like, I remember reading about that while I was just like reading about all this stuff after the movie. But yeah, Steve, go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that part up too. But and that comes with the cult status as well. That comes with the cult status this movie's kind of taken on. Because I always go back to Kyle MacLachlan's account of the movie. Because it doesn't help. Everybody's been kind of wishy-washy on this, like the cast and crew. Like Verhoeven said this is a serious movie about the dark underbelly of the American dream. Well, then it started to get panned, and then he came out and he was like, it was never meant to be taken seriously. And same with Elizabeth Berkley's kind of gone back and forth. So it's hard to understand where the truth lies. I think the truth lies with Kyle MacLachlan, though, in his statement, because I'll paraphrase it. But he even said, too, he said, when I took on this movie, this is just me, he's like, when I took on this movie, I thought we were making like a serious drama, and that's how I wanted to come off, like to fit that. He's like, I remember watching the premiere of it, and I'm like, he's like, I get through the opening scene, and I'm like, that sucks, but I hope the rest of the movie's better. And then he's like, it just got worse. And then he's like, people are laughing. And he even said, too, he said it was hard. He's like, sitting in that theater, you're watching like something you've worked on for months and been a part of. He's like, it is not what I thought it would be. And then the response and the reviews and everything and the controversy and it bombing, he's like, it was legitimately a low point in my life when all that happened. He's like, I'm happy it's kind of taken. He's like, I'm happy it's taken on a whole new life. You know what I mean? And people appreciate it and people are reevaluating it. But he said in the moment in 95, he's like, it was awful to experience the come down of that movie.
It's awful, but it goes to show like kind of the aimlessness Verhoeven had, or the scriptwriter
Joe Estes
had, and how they misguided this movie. Because that opening scene, it gives off weird signals, not in an uncomfortable way, but in a very confusing way. Because the shot, like I'm gonna really like get technical, but like the shots where it's a wide shot and the car is like when Nomi has the knife to him, to the driver, to the guy, and then he starts like wildly driving all over the place, and they're trying to have like cool dialogue and like tension or whatever, but it just comes off as like the parody almost, like a joke of that's kind of making fun of movies that it's actually trying to be. So it's almost, honestly, this is sounding more and more like a Room situation, although not to as a severe degree, and made way more competently. But and like the fact that it mirrors at the end also gives me a bad taste in my mouth of like, because like I'm sure if you mapped like on the timeline from when the when the rape scene happens to that ending scene where it's trying to be clever and come full circle and be like, hey, yeah, he gets his comeuppance at the end, and he's driving wildly all over the highway. It's incoherent. It's not incoherent, but I'll say emotionally incoherent in that it just doesn't know what it wants.
Not to mention improbable circumstances, to say the least. And like,
Yeah.
she gets the starring role. She gets the starring role too in Goddess, and then she up and leaves. You know,
Yeah.
she up and she up and leaves. Like, I get, probably because it was like, it wasn't going to be long before her real identity was exposed and stuff. You know, but like, she just, again, drops everything and leaves. But they still leave it open for a sequel too. They still leave it open for a sequel. With the
I
way
just
it zooms in
realized.
Los Angeles time.
Did you ever see the sequel, Steve? The Penny
The
spinoff?
Pennies from Heaven, I've not.
Okay.
And I'm not in any rush. What were you saying, Dom?
I just realized. Does Nomi have like a fall from grace? Kinda, sorta, but not really. She kind of like defeats the fall from grace by beating up the rapist, and then like what does she do to Zach at the end? Doesn't she like she kind of like kicks his ass and just leaves? She doesn't have a fall from grace. She
spits at him because he found out her real identity. Because he found out her real identity and stuff. And then the trade-off was either you and your friend keep quiet about the rape, she gets hush money, or your background is coming out, because nobody knows who the hell you are in Vegas. That was kind of like the dichotomy there too, or like the trade-off there.
It feels like a loose thread. It's mixed signals, man.
There was supposed to be a sequel though. Naomi Does Hollywood was the name of it.
Yeah.
Oh, seriously?
Naomi, not
there were
Naomi.
talks. There was talks about a sequel too. They did make one, which Joe referred to,
Yeah.
Showgirls 2, Pennies from Heaven, I think it's called.
Yeah.
I actually won that DVD in a YouTube giveaway. I won that DVD, to be honest with you. It was like a 5-pack of DVDs. I entered this YouTube giveaway. I won them. And that was like the only one I didn't watch. That was the only movie of the 5 that I won that I didn't watch, because it's not been well reviewed, but there's been its couple defenders, I guess you could say. I just don't want to watch it. I don't have any desire. Nobody came back. Like, I don't have any desire to really sit through it.
Because here's the thing, at least Showgirls has production to it. There's at least something there. Like, it feels professionally done. I mean, this looks like, I hate to say it, this is like Tommy Wiseau level filmmaking. So it's just like,
Wow.
you're really taking like cult status film and then just like, okay, now you're making it like worse. Like, I'm looking at the trailer right now, and this looks like a YouTube parody of Showgirls.
It's 20 years late, and then you're gonna make a direct-to-DVD sequel with nobody tied.
Yeah.
Like, if Verhoeven was a producer, I'd maybe watch it. If Joe Esther has wrote it or co-wrote it, I might watch it.
Yeah.
But not at that juncture, no. I sat through Bigger, Fatter, Liar. I don't need to sit through Showgirls too. But at any rate, I think this was an excellent discussion. I think, like Showgirls, it flew by. I think this was an excellent discussion. You already know my star rating from my review and stuff like that, but I want to know what your final thoughts and star ratings are. So, Joe, let's start with you. Dom, you'll send us home.
I mean, despite like, some of the negative things I brought up, and despite that most people claim this is one of the worst movies ever made, this is just easily a 2 out of 4 star movie for me. I just thought it was just kind of like okay. I talked about the points I liked about the movie. I think the dancing's good. It's a sexy movie, I'll say that. And I think that for the most part, other than Berkeley, performances aren't actually that bad. So I don't see like why people say it's one of the worst films ever made. And other points that we brought up, like, this does have some production to it. It does look nice. There's plenty of like really cool looking scenery, and the stage productions of the whole Showgirls aspect of this is very well done. To me, yeah, it's just a 2-star movie. I was never bored by it though, so that's why I'm not going any lower than that.
Yeah, I got to mirror Joe here. I went hard on it, and I'm glad I did, because narratively, this Showgirls is emotionally incoherent, and it wants to be a lot. It feels like it wants to be a lot of things, but it just can't decide it. And by the time it gets to maybe figuring out what it wants, it has not done the work prior to sufficiently deliver that feeling. So it just winds up leaving you, okay, well, what are we going to fall back on? Well, the sex scenes were actually good in terms of like delivering something character-wise, in terms of good cinematography and beyond the usual boring sex scenes that are honestly meaningless, particularly of the time in the 90s when they were rampant. And then the dance scenes were actually entertaining. They had some work put into them, and they were gritty. They were Las Vegas, man. So with that, I gotta mirror Joe. I gotta give it 2 stars because this is honestly junk food, and not like the cleaned up, lean, sodium-free junk food. This is good old-fashioned 90s era hard MSG. Put in as much gluten as you possibly can in this junk food. This is great to put on in the background if it's a rowdy night and you're having fun. Apparently, if you have gay friends, they'll love this movie too. So what I've heard from the culture. Yeah, whatever. It's entertaining, man. It's the last. It's like it feels like the last gasp of the 80s. Of the 80s era of all the excess, and it was a moment, and I'm really glad I watched it, man. Yeah.
I love that. We're gonna wrap up right there. I thought that was an excellent summation between the junk food and then the dying breath of the 80s. I think that's a really excellent way to put this. I might actually use that down the line, because as far as this movie is one of those ones for me as a writer and a film critic, it really defies star rating for me. I could write you a 2 out of 4 star review of Showgirls right here, right now. I could write you a 4-star review of it. Seriously. I could. And I've called it. And the documentary, You Don't Know Me, sums this up perfectly. When it first came out, it was regarded as a piece of shit. And then in the mid 2000s is about when you started to see some discourse and people even using the word masterpiece. Well, now in the modern day, and one of the cast, I don't want to misquote. One of the cast referred to it. I can't remember who it was, but they use the term in the documentary. They call it a masterpiece of shit, which is essentially where I kind of stand on it too, because that's the beauty I love about it. I tell people, I'm like, this could be 1 stars, it could be 4 stars. It exists in a world where a lot of stars shine, but not a lot of it makes sense. And I think that's the beauty thing of this. And I bet you I'll watch it in a couple more years. I really want to do a deep dive into Verhoeven's catalog. I've seen a lot of his Hollywood stuff. I haven't seen much of his work in the Netherlands, his home country. I haven't seen much of his work there in the early 70s. I think in January I'm going to go back, rewatch a lot of stuff, because Total Recall, RoboCop, Starship Troopers, and then dive into his really early stuff. Because I think the only big Hollywood movie he did, outside of Flesh and Blood, which wasn't really big, the only other Hollywood movie that he did that I didn't watch was Hollow Man. That one I haven't seen, with Kevin Bacon. But at any rate, though, great show, guys. You guys didn't disappoint. Credit to HBO Max, too, for putting the NC-17 version of Showgirls on HBO Max. Awesome stuff. Because when we were planning to do this, it was not on any streaming service. Like, I was thinking I was going to have to mail you guys my one of my 2 DVD copies of the movie.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yes, I have the original DVD, and I have the one with the deluxe edition. Came with a deck of cards and pasties and a shot glass. Anyway,